my granddaughter with all my heart. And I tried to be the best daddy I could be. But there is nothing so close to my heart to hear one of my girls or my granddaughter or my grandsons come up to me and call me daddy. I don't want them to call me father. Anybody can be a father. Anybody can be a father. But it takes a special person to be able to be a daddy. And our Heavenly Father is our daddy. He wants to be with you. He's proud of you. He wants to lift you up. When you fall down and scrape your knee, He wants to pick you up, dust you off, and help you get going again. He cares for you that much. Daddy, I belong to you. I'm glad we sung that song this morning. Because it just, Stephanie sends out her list, and I was studying some, and I filled out another song, and then it didn't fit. And I told her, I said, leave it the way it is. And then God just moved everything into place.
That's right.
So, thank you, worship team, this morning. We had a great honor. For many of you who maybe don't have Facebook or aren't friends with Stephanie or some of the rest of us, Stephanie had the opportunity last Friday. She's on the third Friday of the month. She goes to Merced to celebrate recovery and leads worship down there for celebrating. Represents Freedom Church. Okay. So, again, this isn't just about here. It's about reaching out and doing other things. So I want you, on the third Friday of every month, to keep Stephanie in prayer as she goes down there and we get things, begin to reach out some more. Next Sunday, just to give everybody a heads up, okay? Next Sunday, I will not be here. Sister Lena will be taking charge of the service. Pastor Dean will be ministering to you. And I usually try to get out of the weekend work, but this next weekend I can't because we've got some stuff going on that I need to be there. I have to be there up in Vegas, so I won't be here next week. Be here. Be here. Support them. Support Pastor Dean. You know, he is a great man of God and a great speaker. I always get blessed when he speaks. And I had scheduled him to speak again. I try to use him as much as I can, and then it fell, so I have to be off. So it worked out real well. But Lena will be taking charge of service. After service next Sunday, everybody listening? After service next Sunday, Ben's I won't be here. The next weekend, the 29th and 30th is our yard sale. We are going to go after service Sunday morning, this next Sunday. I need you guys, if you got pickups, bring them. If you got cars, empty your trunks out. And Lena needs to take you guys over to the storage that we rented and move all the yard sale stuff into the sanctuary. We're going to push some chairs back out of the way. We're going to set up the tables, get the stuff so we can price it, okay? So there'll be no Bible study that week because we're going to have this taken up. So what we're doing is setting it up so Saturday or Friday morning when the ladies come down or whoever comes down to help with the yard sale, they just pick the tables up, carry them outside, everything's priced, set up, ready to go. So I need your help. I'm asking. That's with Lena. You have to get with her on that. I'm just making the bulk announcement. I don't know. So that's next Sunday after church. Now, our 2-year anniversary is coming up. Very shortly. See the lady in the green with the notebook waving it around. She is going to come to you and twist your arm, hold you down until you sign up for some food.
That's right.
Not to receive, but to bring. Okay? You ain't signing up for food to get. Okay? So she's going to put together what you can bring and who all can do what. And she's going to get this all together. If you have a special dish, because I heard someone say they made lasagna.
For me?
Yeah.
Who's this for me?
You did. See, the first Sunday she came, she let that slip, and I remembered it. Somebody mentioned ricotta cheese, and she said, "Oh, I make this some kind of lasagna."
I'll make
And she ratted herself out. See, nobody even dropped a dime on you, huh? So if you have something that you make, you like to make, get with Sister Cammie. She's got a booklet back there. She's going to be signing you up, and she'll be organizing things so that we know what we have and what we don't have.
Yes, that's true.
I believe we'll have plenty of desserts. Sister Karen, thank you so much for all that. And if not, if you make a special dessert, put it down. We'll take it too. So that Sunday, we're going to have just an anniversary service. We're in the process, other than my wife's computer crash, we're trying to get that back up. We're going to have some slideshows of things that have taken place in the last 2 years. And, I'm proud to be a part of you and part of Freedom Church and to make it 2 years. There's a lot of churches that don't make it 2 years. But God has built this church, not us. Every person that has came here has been God brought him. Every office that is filled right now in this church has been filled by God putting those people into place.
That's right.
So you didn't bring the things we got Wednesday night, did you?
Mm-hmm.
The certificate.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you brought them. Anyways, so where was that? Okay, so the anniversary, we're going to set up the canopies. We're going to have a potluck dinner. I want everyone to hang around. I want everybody to enjoy themselves. Invite your friends. Let them know you're proud of where you go to church. And we're having a lot of times they'll come to a special service. And it isn't about the anniversary. It's about reaching the lost. Invite your friends. They may like it here. There's a lot of people who come to church here. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people come to church here who aren't Christians, but they like the atmosphere. They like the people. They like the music.
That's right.
But the church thing ain't for them. That's okay. You know what's happening every day? We're planting seed.
That's
We're planting seed.
right.
You know what? I'm planting seed, and then some chairs come along and water it. And the sun's shining on it, and we're planting more seed, and Tony goes by and waters, and it's changing the heart.
That's right.
See, that's what church is about.
That's right.
That's what we're all together, working together for Him. So remember that. Get with Sister Cammie. Let's get this down. Now, that's on the 7th. On the 6th, I'm going to do I'd like to do a little work day if we could. Mow the yards, make everything look nice, blow off the parking lot, put our best foot forward, for that day. Make sure the hall is clean. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do with the kids because there's going to be so much food in there. Good. And I'm going to tell you, the last time we had a potluck, it was excellent.
Yes.
Now, I've been raised in church, and I've been to a lot of potlucks. This potluck was the best I've ever been to. Every bit of the food, because you always have that one dish that's like, oh, Sister So-and-so made it. Ooh. I made some of her cooking before. I'll buy it like that. But that did not happen. That did not happen at this last potluck. Because I got to taste some of everybody's everything, and it was great. I'm in trouble for being honest again. I don't know, sometimes things come in here and there's no filter or nothing. Okay, so did I miss any announcements, babe? I got them all. Now, we have been blessed. We're picking up some stuff this afternoon. It must be, I don't know how it is, but these ladies had a yard sale. They're moving, and everything was left over, house items and stuff. They're giving it all, donating it all to the church.
Yay!
And so,
I went to the yard sale and I witnessed about Freedom Church.
Yeah.
And they said they donated.
and they donated all the leftover stuff. Lena's coffin. There's some tables. I don't know what else. We'll be getting that into the storage too, so we'll have that. So it's really looking forward to. All the proceeds are going to go toward the children's church, which may even pay for concrete in the shed so we can clean out this children's church, for the children's church. So it's going to be for that area over there, and try to get it going. So this morning, real quick, I got to tell this one.
He looks at you one.
This lady, this man, been married several years. They both had their birthday on the same day, kind of remember them, Kim and Steve, and they're both turned 60 years old. God said, you know what, you've been great people, married for all these years, and You're 6 years old, your birthday falls on the same day. He says, I'll give you both one prayer wish and I'll fill it. Went to the lady and the lady said, you know, I've always wanted to travel around the world. I'd love to travel around the world. God said, okay, give him. She looked at it, she had 2 tickets for a round the world trip. He said, that's great. Turned to the man and says, what would you like to have, sir? And he says, you know, I've always wanted to be married to someone 30 years younger than me. He was 90 years old. You need to watch what you ask for, you know? You need to watch what you ask for. I got more, but I'll just save them.
Don't save them.
So let's turn this morning. Turn to John 13:1. I read this and I shared with my wife as I was studying this week. Because God was leading me, and I wrote out a bunch of notes on who you are. Because we had talked about seasons in our life, and then we talked about lifestyle changes. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm telling all these people all this stuff you got to change, but am I telling them who they are? And so I began to make notes on who we are. And as I was reading through the Bible and just not studying, just looking and talking with him and listening, and he led me to this chapter. And as I began to read it, he began to pull things out. And I kept saying, God, this doesn't go with what I've been studying. He says, I know. And so I was torn. And I began to make notes on something else. And it took till Saturday when I was at work. I was in the excavator running it, and I had my worship music going as I was loading trucks. And he began to speak to me with his verses. So what we're going to study, I got to kind of give you an overview of what's taking place here. This is the Passover. And this is before Easter, before Christ goes to the cross, and before he raised from the dead. Now, many of you know me, I'm not a holiday preacher. Just because it's Christmas, I don't teach on Christmas. And just because it's the crucifixion and Easter, I may not do an Easter message. But that's just the way I am. I give you what I feel God puts in my heart, regardless of what the day is. Even though today is St. Patrick's Day. So I couldn't find any leprechauns in the Bible. So Jesus has met and spent time with his people. He's been on this earth for 32 years, but the last 3 years of his life, he has walked daily with his disciples. They have become his friends. How many have ever had close friends you just like hanging with? You know, you can share. You can laugh, you can have a good time, you can be honest with them. Sometimes brutally honest when you have to be, but it's in love. Jesus had spent that time with these disciples. And so now the time of the Passover was coming, and in the Old Testament, the Passover, it was because they got delivered from the land of Egypt. And so they would slay a lamb, and they would do the whole ritual of the Passover feast and all. So it was coming from that time. And Jesus is saying we need to spend some time with my friends. But Jesus knew what was going to take place very shortly. He knew that at some point, Judas Iscariot was going to betray him to the high priest. He knew that he was going to be taken before Pilate. He knew that he was going to be tortured. He knew that he was going to be hung on a cross for our sins. He was going to take the sins of the world upon him, and he was going to hang on a cross and die. But see, he also knew that wasn't the end. He knew he was going to die to the end. And he knew it was for not just his friends, but for us. See, we are friends of Jesus. Abraham says he was a friend of God. It's throughout the Bible. It refers back to Abraham was a friend of God. I like to think that I'm a friend of God. I like to think that I'm a friend of Jesus. If you're a disciple, you're one of his. So in John 13:1, it says, it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He knew. He knew it was time. See, God knows everything. I shared with you before, we see things in snapshots. God sees things in a panoramic view, and God does not start anything until he's already finished it. He already knew. So Jesus knew what was taking place. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved the disciples, and they were going to be in the world. He loves you, even though you're in the world. And he knows, and I believe his heart was moved with compassion because he knew where he was leading them. He now showed them, and I got this, the full extent of his love. Everything he had done and taught and led them in for the past 3 years was coming to an end. And he knew he had to show them the full extent of his love. Turn to Mark 14. Now hold your finger there because we will be coming back to 13:1. But turn to Mark 14:12 through 17. It's very interesting when I began to study this. Mark 12 or 14:12 through 17. On the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" And he sent 2 of his disciples, telling him, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house," he enters, "the teacher asks, 'Where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." The first thing I noticed is he's making preparations, a perfect place. He had a place in mind and set up for him to be with his friends. Every time you go to your place of worship, at your house or your quiet time, it's a place prepared for you to spend with him. A special place. A place that just like Christ prepared a place, a certain place, we need to make a certain place. There's a room in my house that I use. It's our extra bedroom. And I go in there, and I turn on my worship music, and I close the door, and I have a chair I sit in. I don't, I do sometimes, but there's a chair I sit in, and I begin to talk to the Father. That's our special place, my place that I create for him. You need to create a place at your house and a regular place that is just yours to be able to be with him. Jesus said, "Go. You'll find a man carrying a jar of water." If you imagine that, the first thing I would have thought, there's probably dozens of people carrying water because nobody had running water. But you'll find a man carrying a jar of water, follow him. Could you imagine being the guy carrying the jar of water? You look around, these guys are still following you? What's up with that? Yeah. Hide your wallet. And he says, when you go to the house, this is what happens when you go and see, you meet him there, he says, "Where is my guest room?" He didn't say, "Do you have a room available?" Jesus said, "Where is my guest room?" It was a place prepared that Jesus was preparing. I'm going through a lot because I want you guys to understand something for the rest of the message. You will find it furnished, a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there. You can go back to John 13:1. I'll finish it. We'll stay there. So in this time, now they're in a room that's prepared, and the disciples all gathered. Jesus loved these men. They were his close friends. And as I read that this morning, the other day, as I was reading, he showed them the full extent of his love. It just gripped me. See, I don't think we understand the full extent of God's love in our human mind. I don't think we understand exactly what, and I mean, we understand he gave his only begotten son, but do we understand that he would have done more than that? He loves us that much that nothing would stand in the way except for you of receiving his love. You hear that? Nothing can stand in the way of you receiving his love but you. You have to make the decision to receive it. Because he loves you. He loved you from the beginning of time. His love. So in verse 3 it says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had came from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that he poured water in a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I want to try to emphasize that. Jesus, when they were eating at the table, it's not like a Last Supper picture where they're all sitting at a table in chairs. They actually reclined when they ate at that time on the ground, on pillows. And they would lay on their left side with their feet extended back away from the table. And it's the way they would eat. And that's the reason you'll see in the Bible where one of them leaned over against Jesus and asked him something. Okay? So Jesus gets up from what they're doing and eating. And he takes a towel and he wraps it around him. He takes off his outer garment, ties it around him. He gets a bowl of water and a pan. See, I've seen foot washings when I was growing up. You don't see it much anymore in churches. But I believe right now, as I began to read it, it has the right intent, but the wrong way. Because they're showing to be servant to one another, and I totally agree with that. But we take it so lightly about being a servant to others. Because some of us think that maybe we are, we can be a servant to this point, but we can't be a servant farther than that. See, being a servant is to do anything of a master's will. Anything of a master's will. So when God asks you to do something, you can say, God, I can do that, but I can't do that. I can minister to this person, but I can't minister to that person. I can go here, but I can't go there. But when God sends you somewhere, you're to be a servant. So Jesus gets up, puts on a towel. These men are laying, and he goes and he becomes basically a slave. He humbles himself. Now get this, the God of the universe, the God who created the world, the God who done everything possible for Adam and Eve, the God who supplied the children of Israel with food and water and a cloud and heat and shelter, takes off his outer robe, puts on a towel, gets a basin of water. Now get this, sitting in a chair is one thing to get your feet washed. But to go to the far end of someone's feet that's laying and kneel down and take a basin and begin to wash the dirt off someone's feet. See, at that point in time, that was the lowest place you could be. The most humble at someone's feet. And Christ did that for his friends. The point of washing the feet is that point of where I'm a servant unto God, unto whatever he wants me to do, and I'm a servant unto you. I am no higher than you, no better than you. I live for Christ, I live for Christ alone. And that way, I am doing anything I need to do, whatever level I need to do it at. but I am no greater. And he began to dry their feet with a towel that he had wrapped around him. We find that he knew his time was coming. The last several chapters of John, you'll find that Jesus is exclusively teaching on his own and his disciples to prepare them for what is coming. He is trying to get them. How many notice that if you read the Bible and you start reading about Jesus' teaching with the disciples, sometimes he looked up and said, "Really? You don't get it? Did you not listen to what I was saying?" He's trying to get them to a place because he knows what's coming. He, the God of the universe, is humbling himself, washing their feet, because he knows in just a short period of time, they're going to fail him. See, sometimes God blesses me and he anoints me, even though in a short period of time I may fail him. Is that love?
Yes. Yes.
See, in my human nature, I'm not going to help you if I know you're going to fail anyway. I'm not going to help you. Our human nature says that to ourselves, is if you can't extend anything if you don't get anything back. But God humbled himself and washed their feet because he loved them, and he wanted, even though he knew in a short period of time they were going to fail him. In one translation, the full extent of his love is, it says the end in the King James Version. The end, in end, it means, in Greek, is telos. It means conclusion or termination or goal or aim or fulfillment of. God knew where he was going and the fulfillment of his love needed to take place. Knowing all this, he chose to demonstrate his love for his friends, or his disciples, by taking the role of a slave and washing the feet of his disciples. You'll find in John 12:1-7, where Jesus was at a home of Lazarus, and there was a dinner being prepared in his honor, and Mary came with a jar of pure nard and anointed his feet and dried it with her hair. And the whole room, the Bible says the whole room was the smell of the aroma, the perfume of the nard. I looked it up, and nard is a very expensive oil that is created from spikenard. But at times, it was so expensive, they would add other inferior oils to it to make it go farther. Or they would actually even try to counterfeit that oil. But Jesus was anointed. In both Mark and John, you'll see that it says pure, genuine. And Jesus said this. Someone said, "Oh, that's so expensive. Why are they wasting it?" And he said, "It is for my burial." I really believe that as he passed through, after his scourging, and he was carrying the cross down the road, that you could smell the smell of the anointing perfume as he passed by. Oil is this type of anointing. That fragrance is a worship. When we worship, it is an anointed fragrance to the Father, and it rises. It's important for worship. It's important for praise. It's important that we know who he is, and he knows we know who he is. So as he begins to wash the feet, Peter speaks up. I got to say something about Peter. He's the only other man in history that ever walked on water. But he had some issues. We have a friend of ours that he's a Peter. He will jump out of the boat. He just goes. Just right now. God draws himself. He don't count the cost. He don't try to figure out where he's going. You know, want to feed the hungry? Let's go. Where are you getting the food from? I don't know. We're going to feed the hungry. That's Peter. But Peter also had some issues, and I think with a little bit of pride. Because he actually thought in his mind, he was so split with his mind and his spirit, man. There were times that he understood the spirit, but majority of the time he thought with his mind. He was looking for an earthly kingdom to be set up. See, at one point, Jesus asked him, and I think it's in Matthew 16:13 through 19. Jesus asked him, who do people say that I am? And they said, well, some say you're prophets, some say you're Elijah, some say Jeremiah. And Jesus said, no, but who do you say that I am? Let me ask you this question. Who is Jesus in your life today? Who do you say he is? Is he a good man? Is he someone who blesses you? Is he your Savior? What is in your heart, in your spirit, what is Jesus to you today? I'm going to tell you today, every day he's something new to me. You know what he is to me today? He's my daddy that I climb up in his lap and he holds me. And he caresses me. And he tells me everything's okay. And he tells me I'm with you. I'll never leave you. Because there's times I need that. And this week has been that time. There are times that he's my friend and we just walk along and talk. There are times that he just comes and puts his arm around me. There are times that me and him laugh because we enjoy the things of God. But what is he to you today? So when they asked him, so Peter always seems to be speaking up. Good or bad, you got to get in this. He'll say something. He said, thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus looks at him and said, you didn't receive that from man. You received that from the Father. But then just a few verses down, just very short period of time, Jesus is telling him, I'm going to go to the cross. He's prophesying, telling him about his death coming. And Peter speaks of, oh no, pull him to the side. Don't be talking like that, Jesus. Don't be talking like that. And immediately, God turns around and says, get thee behind me, Satan. Now, he wasn't saying Peter's Satan. What he's saying is, your mind is thinking on things of man, not on things of God. You need to change your thinking.
Yes.
See, many of us today, when God is saying, this is who you are in me, you're saying, no, I'm not. Don't be talking like that, Jesus. And he's saying, hey, get that mind right. You are who I say you are. Use the mind of the Spirit, not of that of man. So Peter jumps up as they're beginning to wash feet, and Peter says, oh no, God, Jesus, you're not washing my feet. No. Everybody else, now how would it look? Everyone else is allowing Jesus to wash his feet, and suddenly he says, no, you're not washing mine. Does that sound like pride?
Yeah.
See, you want to make a point that, I recognize who you are. And as I began to read that, and Jesus answered, you do not realize what I'm doing, but later you will understand. Unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Right there, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. That's a message of salvation. Because I want to show you right here in foot washing grace. You drop down to verse 10. A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. So what that's saying is, if I take a bath, now you gotta remember, they wore sandals and they wore robes. When you walked on dirt roads, not paved streets, dust, from the road and from walking, can you imagine? And I don't wear sandals very often. But those of you who do, how often do you have to wash your feet when you wear sandals?
Quite a few.
Okay? Why don't you let it go a little bit? These men have walked from wherever. So it was a custom at that time, when you entered someone's house, there was a basin and a bowl, and your feet were washed by the servants. What God is saying to them, you are clean, you are saved, but your feet get a little dust on them from walking around in this world.
Right.
Don't condemn yourself because you got dirty feet. Don't condemn yourself because you got dirty feet. You're clean. And Jesus said, you don't need to take a bath. You're saved. I just need to wash your feet. I just need to wash your feet. I just need to wash a little of the world off, the dust that accumulates from walking through. Because I'll tell you right now, walking through this life, it is hard to keep things from the world from hanging on you.
Right.
I'm just going to be honest with you. Steve knows, many of the rest of me and Steve work construction. All the construction guys we work with are Christians, aren't they? They never say nothing out of line, never do nothing out of line. And I shared with you before, sometimes that stuff hangs on you. I've shared with you because I get so used to hearing the language that I tune it out, that I can be watching a TV program and never hear the language that's coming off the TV. And my wife, because she doesn't hear it every day, say, hey, did you hear what? You didn't even catch it, babe. That's dust. That's dust that gets on us. Think about it. This is such a great message of grace that God has for you, the time and the ability to become who He wants you to become. You got a bath. I just need to wash the dust off you every once in a while. I just need to wash your feet because you're traveling through this world and stuff's going to stick to you. But the thing there, it says, but not every one of you. He washed all the feet of all the disciples. Pretty good, huh? Think about this. He washed the feet of Judas,
Yes.
who was going to betray him.
Mm-hmm.
I gripped my heart. He was a disciple and a friend. And Jesus knew he was going to betray him. But what did he do? He washed his feet anyways. Is that love?
Yes, sir.
That's his love. Because I got news for you. If I was washing the feet and I knew that guy wasn't, I'd skip him. I'd just say, you know, look, dude, just hit the road. And I really believe it grieved the heart of the Father when he had to do it, when it got to that place. Not that he didn't want to, but it grieved his heart. And I'm going to show it to you. If you go down to verse 15, I have set an example that you should do as I have done. You should do as I've done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Serve others, love others. But I want you to drop down to verse 20 now. It says, I tell you the truth, whoever accepts anyone I send accepts me, and whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. And here's this key scripture, 21. After he said this, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me. He was troubled in his spirit and grieved. You know what that says to me? It broke his heart. Not that I washed the feet of the betrayer, but that one of his friends was going to betray him. I've had people ask me, was it designed that way? I'm going to tell you something a little bit. God knows your heart. It's not predestined, but He knows the type of person. He knew before Judas ever did this, what Judas would do. Because He knew that Judas had a money thing going on. He was the guy who carried the purse strings. He carried the treasury. He's the one who spoke up and said, hey, you're wasting that expensive perfume. It could be sold and given to the poor. No, it could be sold and put in my pocket. He was not concerned about the poor. He was concerned about them. Jesus washed the feet of the very person. And it grieved Him that one of His friends was going to do that. Then Jesus answered, you go down to verse 26. It is the one. See, they all ask each other, who? I mean, I would actually be asking myself, even though I know I wasn't planning on it, am I the one? Did Judas betray Christ for 30 pieces of silver? Some of us today do it for a lot less. For the gratification of one little thing. Or sometimes I don't think we actually betray Him. I actually think we grieve Him because the Holy Spirit nudges you and says, do you really need to be doing this? And we override that and we do it anyway. I'm speaking from experience. I'm not, don't get me wrong. When I say stuff like that, I'm not pointing fingers except for back at me. Because I've walked it, I did it, and sometimes I still do it. It's not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But it takes you trying every day. It takes you trying every moment. It takes you having to spend the time in His presence. It takes you having to spend the time in His Word. It takes you having to take the time to pray. And sometimes it takes you just sitting in the quietness and listening to Him.
Right.
I think some of my best time that I spend with God is when I sit in my room on my chair and my worship music is playing and I sit there and I clear my mind. I don't want to talk to the Father until my mind is clear. Because if I'm going in there and I still got things of life going on or work or what I got to do afterwards, you know what God says? Come back when you're not busy. Really think about it. That's why I have to find my quiet place, and I jump so I don't hear the outside noises. I don't hear the kids. I don't hear Lena cooking. I don't hear anything else going on. But it's me and God and me and Him, and I'm listening to Him. That's what it takes to get the dust washed off of you. Get your feet clean. Jesus knew at the time when He washed all their feet that in a short time they would all fail Him in the hour of His greatest need. See, one of the best movies I think ever made that I think was actually portrayed it very well was the crucifixion of Christ. It's very graphic, but it's very real. Me and Lena have read some books and stuff on it, and they actually say when they whipped His back, it actually opened it up. You could see His lungs. He loves you that much. He loved you because the Bible says, by His stripes we were healed. They weren't just little marks. And see, those stripes not only pertain, and I believe they pertain to the spiritual healing as well as physical, but more of a spiritual healing. See, they weren't just like whack, 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 and a few red marks, and that's the stripes. No, they ripped Him apart from here to His shoulders. That's how He loves. See, it's easy to love someone if it don't cost you anything. It's easy to love someone if they reciprocate that. I use the word right. They give it back. But to love someone that you know possibly will never love you back, and go through that because you love him that much. That's his love. What you did or what you ever do does not determine his love for you. What you've done or did or will ever do does not determine his love for you. It doesn't make it any more, and it doesn't make it any less, because God has perfect love for each and every one of us. See, the problem is our perception and how much we really think he loves us. And see, that is where fear comes in, is because when we don't have faith, fear comes in. Lack of faith is fear. And when we step out of that bubble of his perfect love and we move into the fear zone, it's we're saying, God, I just don't trust you. I don't trust your love for me. I'm not saying that it don't happen, that you question something. Because I'll be honest, there's times I went to pray and I've asked God why. There is nothing wrong with my kids used to ask me, why? And I didn't just give them because I said so. Sometimes I did. But there's times when I ask God why, and he says, be patient. Be patient. And that's the hard part, being patient.
Right.
He also knew that Peter would deny him to save his own skin. Judas had already conspired to betray him. So they asked Jesus who, and he said, it's the one who I give the bread to. Do you know that Judas was sitting at the seat of honor? He was sitting to his right hand side. In the seat of honor. It amazes me all the things, even though he knew what Judas was going to do. He washes his feet. He loved him. He took him. He taught him. And now he's in the seat of honor. And when Judas took the bread, it says that Satan entered into his heart. Because he had already thought about it. He hadn't made complete decision. But at that moment, it happened. And Jesus turned to him and said, what you do quickly. In other words, it's time to get this going. It's time for me to fulfill what I need to fulfill, what God sent me to do for mankind. All this time, he loved and cared about his friends and his disciples. And he still washed their feet. In verse 15, we find that Jesus set the example, not about foot washing, but about loving without respecting a return. Not only for those who treat us well, but those who fail us or stab us in the back. In Matthew 5, 43, 44, and 45, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Is that a tough scripture or what? I can tell you from experience of people I know that have been hurt very severely by people. And they began praying for that person that they couldn't even speak their name. Couldn't even say the person's name. But they began to pray for God. Yeah, that person. That was all they could. Couldn't pray a blessing. Couldn't, God, that person. And then pretty soon it's God, and they would say their name. Then pretty soon it's God bless them. God saved them. God changed their ways. And God began to move in a way because they're praying for those who persecute you. Did it happen overnight? No. I know this one person that I'm speaking of, that friend of ours, it took years of praying that. And you know what happened? One day we looked around the church, and the person who had hurt them was sitting next to them in the church. God set us an example. And it's not easy for us. You say, well, it was easy for him to do. He was God. But you got to remember, he was man too. Yes. People say he was 50% God. No, he was 100% God and 100% man. He knew exactly what God had lined for do, but he knew his flesh was just like ours. Only he knew no sin. His flesh did not want to go to the cross and die, and he knew where he was headed. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed until his sweat became as drops of blood because he was praying so hard, because he was saying, Father, let this cup pass from me. Do I have to do this? Do I have to? And then he said, but your will. Because he loved us. See, it's not just the disciples that God was talking about when he said that he loved them and he showed his love to the end. He was talking about us. Each and every one of you. He loves you with an undying love. A love that will never quit, never fail. Jesus commanded to love one another. It's not a commandment to feel affection, but is an act in a loving way, even when you'd rather do otherwise. Do you know your feelings change as much as the wind does? You can feel one way this week and one day that week. You can feel this moment. Forgive me, babe. There was a time my wife was in that changing mode. I'm trying to be delicate. And I'd be talking to her on the phone, coming home. I can't look at Beth because she gives me the evil eye. Yeah. And I'd be talking to her on the phone, and she'd say, okay, I'll sleep. And she'd say, and I'd say, she said, where you at? I said, I just pulled up in front of the house. I'll be right in. Okay. Open the door and boom! Did I drive up in front of the wrong house? I said, our feelings change. So we can't expect to love with a feeling of affection.
That's right.
We have to love knowing we're not going to get anything back, knowing that they may hurt us, knowing that it may change, it may never change. Now let me say this. Let me say this quickly. If you're in a relationship that's physically hurting you or mentally hurting you, you need to get with somebody to get out of that relationship.
Amen.
Get some counseling.
Amen.
It doesn't mean you have to hurt or be mean back, but it does mean that you need to take care of yourself. God gives you a head to use it.
Right.
Pray for that person, but don't keep yourself in that position, in that relationship.
Right.
See, this does not mean you become a whipping post of any kind. It means you love unconditionally. It means you don't have to love with feeling, but it does mean that if you're in that position, you need to step away from that and get out of that situation. Get with people who know what to do and talk to somebody, okay? Don't stay in a relationship like that. In verse 18:21, it really stood out to me, or 18-21, where it says that he was grieved in his spirit. I really believe that God grieves for us every day. He wants us to be more. He wants us to be fuller. He wants you to be have more of Christ in you, more spirit in you. He wants you to be able to touch and reach others. That's what he wants for you. He loves you. I don't know how else to say it. He washes feet of people who are going to betray it. If you really think about that, that just blows me away. It just blows me away. stand with me this morning. Hope I've said the word of God that He gave you this morning to give to you is you've received it this morning. I sometimes think I was talking with someone here a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about different styles of ministry that people have. And there are people who yell and scream and run all over. And when I first started ministry, and I started comparing myself, well, I'm not like this person, I'm not like this person, I'm not like this person, I'm not like this person. And my wife, God spoke to my wife so sweetly and said, He chose you to be who you are. I want to share something with you. God chose you to be who you are. He chose you to be who you are. He loves you because of who you are. He loves you because of who you are. You don't have to be somebody else. You be who you are, who God designed you to be. He loves you. Bow your heads this morning. Father, I thank you for these that you put here. Father, I pray that this word that you've given me this morning will minister to those. And Father, help them realize that you love them no matter what. And that they are clean. They just need a little dust washed off every once in a while. That is such a sign of grace. The time and the ability to become who you want us to become, Father. This morning as they are dismissed, Father, that I speak blessing over them, and you'll go to their homes and their jobs this week and encourage them every day. Help them to find a spot, a place prepared at home to spend some time with you. Because that's where the change is made. Where you can speak to them as Daddy. Where you can hold them as Daddy. You can take care of them. You need prayer this morning, we'll be glad to pray with you. If you want to find a place and pray for a few minutes, you're welcome to.